Kate Donovan, welcome to the Human to Human podcast. I'm so grateful to meet you today. How are you?
I am so grateful to have been introduced to you in the first place. As soon as I read through your website, I was like, yes, we are right here. I'm so into this. I've been waiting. I booked this well in advance. I've been waiting for this conversation for a while, and I'm really, really excited to spend the next, hour-ish with you.
So you are in New York City.
Yes.
A place that hasn't been hit at all by COVID or the
happened.
pandemic. And we were just talking a little bit. I mean, we're going to get into all things burnout because I think what better time of year, unfortunately, to have that conversation than now, especially, even with the holidays coming, is added stress. It's so funny how stressful like Christmas is. When you really think about it, it's like, it should be something fun and celebratory. Yes. And why is it so stressful? Anyways,
I have to do special webinars every year for it.
I bet you do. And you just came out with a new book.
Yes.
The Bounceability Factor?
Bouncebackability Factor.
The Bouncebackability Factor. What a cool name. I shared that name with Brandy, who's my partner, earlier, and she's like, ooh, that's a cool name. So we're going to dive into all of that, but why don't we start with this? I love asking, who is Kate and what's brought you here today? Like, who is Kate today?
Who's Kate today? Kate today is someone that Kate 5 years ago didn't know existed.
Tell me more about that.
Think about it. Yeah. So I left a pre-med focus in college to study Chinese medicine. So we're talking now, many, many moons ago. And that Kate thought that Chinese medicine was the beginning and end of her career. And that Kate thought that for a really long time, especially because not only do I love Chinese medicine and doing acupuncture and herbs and all of it, it's fascinating. What we can do is incredible. I'm continuously amazed by it on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, I've grown a lot since then. And being an acupuncturist brought me to a place where I got burnt out, even though I loved it. So as I untangled
don't people go to get don't people...
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You already know
what
I'm about to say.
The answer is yes.
Don't people go to acupuncture to prevent burnout?
Yes, to prevent burnout, deal with anxiety, depression, mental health, overall stress, tension, all of it. Yes, all of those things. So I got caught up in thinking that, first of all, I'm not allowed to burn out and get stressed because I am an expert in these things. So that shouldn't happen to me, right? Mm-hmm. So the Kate of 5 years ago was convinced still that she had to find a way to make doing acupuncture 5 days a week happy for her. And Kate today is so much happier because she realizes that no matter what she chooses to do, it can't be the same thing every day. So now I have the podcast and I have a book. So I spend some time writing and I have one-on-one burnout clients and I do corporate workshops and I still do acupuncture a couple of days a week. And people say, well, doesn't this lead you to burnout? You're a burnout coach. You're doing so many things. Mm-hmm. But this is exactly the thing that saves me from burnout. Right? So Kate today is doing all sorts of really cool things that she's really interested in and is unafraid of her own growth.
Sounds like you grew a lot in those 5 years. What would you say were some of the biggest life lessons for Kate in those 5 years?
In those 5 years, for me, the biggest things were that I thought that I had really good boundaries. I grew up in Boston. I live in New York. I have a certain brashness about me. And I thought that meant that I had good boundaries. And it did not in any way, shape, or form. My desire to prove to people that I am valuable and lovable by helping them crushed any boundary that I thought that I had. So I would overstep myself constantly. So this is lesson number one for me, is that true boundaries come from saying yes to yourself first, to not saying no to other people. Right?
I love how you just put that.
That's a really big one for me, and something that I teach people all the time. This really, really changed my life in a big way.
What is such a fascinating distinction. True boundaries are saying yes to yourself, not no to other people. Mm. Wow, that is so fascinating. That's very clever. I've never heard it that way before.
I like clever.
Where do you see most people, this is a very broad question, but I think it's going to spark some conversation. Why is it so difficult for us as humans to not put ourselves first? Why is saying yes to others, even though we know deep down may not be the right answer, it's the one we pick 9 times out of 10?
Because we're afraid to be shunned. Really, at the deepest level of it, saying no, we're afraid that that makes us unlovable and not valuable to people. We have not, as a general rule, understood on a deep level that our own value comes from our existence, not from what we do. Your value is inherent, it has nothing to do with what you do. But we don't believe that. Because even when we do a celebration of life after someone passes, all we do is talk about how many people loved them because what they gave to these other people.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about across cultures, what we talk about when people pass is how wonderful they were to other people. We don't talk about how wonderful they were, period. So we have this really built in deep that in order to be considered lovable and valuable, and thus be kept within the society that will help sustain you, you must say yes. You must provide. You must produce. And what we don't realize is that when we are saying yes to ourselves more often, we are providing and producing, but we are providing and are producing in our zone of genius, in a thing that doesn't feel necessarily so heavy for us. But the outside world has told us that hard work is valuable. So when we do this thing that's easy for us and we gain from it, we think that that doesn't count. But that's the only thing that counts. Did I just go too far with that?
No, you took that in the exact way it was meant to go.
Okay.
I think it's largely part in how we were raised.
Yeah.
I would say, my parents would always say, take care of the needs of other people. How my mom is, as like an amazing mom, has always put herself last.
Yeah.
My grandma, love my grandma, and she always puts herself last.
Yeah.
And also, I think maybe it was a part of my Indian culture growing up. It was, in the household, like women kind of do the cooking and the cleaning.
Yep.
Men did the work. But when my parents moved here to Canada from India, my mom started working shortly after arrival. But my aunts back in India, like they never really had jobs. They didn't really work. And so they were the natural kind of caretakers of the home.
Yes, exactly. And that's true for most cultures. I mean, I've lived all over the world. It's pretty much true everywhere.
Mm-hmm. So what led you to pursue burnout and what it is and how to overcome it and then to help people?
So when I finished my acupuncture degree, so acupuncture in the United States is a master's degree. And it's a 4-year program. So I finished a 4-year master's degree in Chinese medicine. I was living in California. I had traveled to Argentina during my master's program and I met somebody. I happened to move to Poland to marry him. So my husband is Polish. And I moved to Poland and I had this ridiculous American-sized student loan bill to pay. And so I needed to get a job. I didn't even know at the time if I could legally practice acupuncture in Poland because I couldn't read the information because I didn't speak the language. So when I got there, I realized that I could. I got a job at a fertility clinic. I worked really hard and I actually ended up out earning some of my counterparts that were in the United States, even though the cost of an average treatment is much, much lower in Poland for economic reasons. And so I got very successful very quickly doing a job that I loved. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to open a private practice and I'm going to take more of the cut for myself. Instead of taking 50% of what I'm earning, I'm going to take, 70 or 80% of what I'm earning, depending on what my bills are. And that makes more sense to me. I am an entrepreneur straight down to my roots. I am not a great employee. I believe in working for myself and I'm good at it. So that made sense to me. So I opened a private practice in Poland and I ended up with a 3-month waiting list. I was on Polish TV. on talk shows, morning shows, in magazines. I made
What do you
it.
think was your factor? Like, what was that unique factor about you that landed you
I
this
was an
kind of
American,
success? Yeah.
first of all. So I was a foreigner, which Polish people still have this belief in sort of the American dream.
Mm.
So me being an American that had chose to live in Poland was already a factor. I was the first person in the country to introduce acupuncture to a fertility center. So there had been people that had done some acupuncture and gynecological work in the country before I existed, but the population at large didn't know about it. Now it's extremely common in Poland to connect fertility treatments and acupuncture, but that was really my doing. So that was something that was a whole new thing. Not only was I introducing a new style of medicine to a problem that in a Catholic-based country, this is a really big deal if you can't have kids. So not only was I introducing a new way to solve it, but I was also foreign and I spoke the language fluently. So people were kind of like, who is this chick? You know?
It's like the perfect trifecta.
Yeah, it was. And what I didn't, so I was in this place where I was 28 years old. I was extremely successful. And I had this waiting list that was really overwhelming for me. If I had been a stronger business person at the time, I would have moved offices, hired an associate and a receptionist, but I didn't know how to do that then. So I still kept doing everything by myself. And after a year and a half of that, I started gaining weight. I was exhausted. I had stopped exercising. My diet went out the window. I was mad at everyone and everything. If my phone rang and it was a number I didn't recognize, I had like a dread in the pit of my stomach that was like, you don't have the time to see more people. This person is going to try to wiggle their way into your schedule. Just don't answer the phone because you can't handle this anymore. It's too much. And so I ended up in this place where my success got too big for me and I didn't know how to expand with it because I couldn't feel any sort of expansion because I was so overwhelmed.
You were so, I mean, it must have felt scary at times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you're that overwhelmed, you also start to lose passion, I'm sure.
You lose everything. I was helping people have babies and I didn't even care. I mean, I know that sounds bad, but people were like, yay, I'm pregnant. And I was like, phew, another person off my schedule. It's like, great. That means that within a couple of months, you're going to be like ready to give birth and I'm going to be able to put somebody in that spot. Basically was the only thing that I was thinking about, which is awful from today's perspective. But that was if I'm being honest, that was my state of mind at the time. And so at some point, I told my husband that this was all too much and that we had to move. And I blamed Poland. It was Poland's fault that this happened to me. Because of course I was a life coach and an acupuncturist and I knew better. So it couldn't be me, obviously. And so I told my husband we needed to go. And we did. We moved to Prague and I started over. And I built a successful but more sustainable practice. Kind of nice and easy, made the money I needed to make. Everything was smooth. I finished paying my student loans. We sort of had a nice little existence in Prague. And after a few years there, I realized that I still was kind of not feeling great. And I read an article one day and it was about burnout. And when I read it, when something is true and you recognize it and your whole body just goes, oh. My whole body just stopped. I had, I'm translating it from Polish in my head now. Goosebumps in Polish is called chicken skin. I was saying chicken skin in my head. I had goosebumps head to toe and I was like, oh my God, this is what happened to me. So then I started, I'm a total nerd. I'm a real big geek. I love research. I like to read the things. Yes, I do acupuncture, but I'm very science-based. I'm very practical, feet on the ground. And I started doing research and all of the research said, well, burnout is the fault of the corporation or the hospital that you're working in. It's the employer's fault. And I was like, yeah, but I'm the employer. So what, There was no information about why I was burning out. So I had to fill in the blanks myself. So I spent almost 3 years digging deeper into the research, figuring out what systems were at play so if the company wasn't responsible for it. There had to be a system within which I was working that created it. And that system had to come from somewhere, which to me is culture, right? The crossover between community, family, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And it took me a few years of digging through this stuff to create a system that says, okay, here are the external factors for burnout. This is what they're saying is work's fault. You know, you're overloaded with work, you're mismanaged, the values are not clear, you're not getting enough praise and recognition, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also this other list of things that can cause you to burn out, which are internal: lack of boundaries, being a people pleaser, having, low self-esteem, not understanding how to charge your worth, not working in your zone of genius, being out of alignment. All of these things are internal reasons that we burn out that were not anywhere in the easy to find research. And they weren't really in any of the research that related to the word burnout. They were related to long-term chronic stress, which ends up in burnout for a lot of people. So when I started digging up all this information and then unwinding it in myself, people started asking for help. Because I was talking about it. I've been feeling like crap. This is what I'm doing. I've been feeling like crap. This is what I'm doing. And people started saying, oh, that happened to me too. Can you help me? And then slowly but surely, half my business became being the burnout expert.
Yeah. And being someone like you who has, lived the experience and then started talking about it and started getting the request to help, I think 2020 has been a pretty insane year. And I mean, insane is kind of putting it lightly. And
yes,
everyone has their own definition. And I think everyone has their own relationship with 2020. Some people have had great years. Some people have had really shitty years. Other people have gone through it all. I know that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this, and everything you said earlier about lack of boundaries, not working in your zone of genius, not having clear alignment on your values. I see that as like, a business owner is always juggling 10 different balls in the air. Yeah. And at any given moment, even if 4 of those balls drop, they're still juggling the other 6 because they don't have time to pick up the other 4. Yeah. So I'm wondering, in your years of work and your years of experience, when people come to you, what are some of the common factors that you see, like right away, like common triggers or common symptoms, for lack of a better word? Because in my mind, I think many people are probably living burnt out and don't realize it.
Yes. Agree with that. So the biggest one is fatigue. People are saying, I'm just so tired. I can't keep up with the business that I created.
So that's like working late, not being able to wake up.
Not even. Sometimes these people are working 20 hours a week. The problem with burnout is that the overwork is overworking in outside of your zone of genius. Mm-hmm. It's not actually it's not always related to the hours. Mm. When I was in Prague, I was only doing 25 hours of work a week and I was still exhausted. Right. So this is the thing that really trips people up. Like, because I don't think that I should be tired, I'm not noticing that I am tired because I refuse to accept that this lifestyle would make me tired.
Right.
So, but fatigue is a really big one. The next one that I see the most frequently is high levels of resentment and blame. I say, my partner is complaining that I suck lately, basically, is what it comes down to. I'm exploding at my family all the time. They're sick of me. They told me that I need to do something with myself. I feel like I know that I'm acting crazy, but I can't seem to stop myself. So this inability to have any sort of flexibility in your emotional state, it's just you're on fire almost all the time. So you're exhausted and irritable and resentful and angry and frustrated all at the same time. So this is a really big one. The next one that comes usually in the form of a question is, the words that I hear are, I just woke up and I thought, is this it? just a real deep disappointment in the life that you created. And so this is another thing that for entrepreneurs, this is really hard for us to accept, because we create these systems for ourselves. Why did I create a system that makes me feel like crap? Is it me? Is it the system? What's going on here? I don't understand. I thought that if I made enough money, had enough free time, did blah, 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 that I would be happy. And I'm not, and I don't know what to do.
It's like a never-ending happiness list.
Yes. The when if continuum. When if.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Kate, that you talk about how burnout brains have a harder time building relationships. That's something I'm really fascinated by. This podcast is all about going deep on relationships, and I think the relationship that so many people consistently forget about is the one that they have with themselves. I could tell as I was speaking, you were like, you knew what was coming out of my mouth. But talk to me a little bit about, when it comes to building relationships, how are people unable to form ideal relationships? How are they unable to grow their network? How are they unable to build better relationships with their clients, with their prospects, with their parents when they're burnt out?
Well, people feel like better relationships means doing more for other people. And when you're already burnt out, you don't have the space for it. So you pull away from relationships because, again, like I said in the beginning, you have not understood your inherent value. So you think that if you get into a relationship with someone, business, whatever, that there is a certain amount that you have to provide in order to be still considered a member of the relationship. This is really hard. But more importantly, and something that no one is talking about, except for me over and over and over again everywhere I go, but that no one is talking about, is that when you are under a certain level of chronic stress, even if it's low, for a long period of time, and you're getting to the point, or you have gotten to the point where you are burnt out, the frontal cortex of your brain, so the area of your brain that sits right behind your forehead, is diminished. Literally, you lose brain cells there. So if you measured it 2 years ago and measured it today, you would have less. It might only be 1/4 of a millimeter, but it's less. This is the part of your brain that they call your executive functioning. So this is the part of your brain that's responsible for taking an extreme emotional reaction that you have in your animal brain and saying, oh no, I'm an adult, I'm totally okay, and we're going to survive, and I don't need to do this right now. This is also the part of your brain that's responsible for mirror neurons. So when we see each other and we're trying to create a relationship, I see something in you and I create it in myself so that you understand that I'm here with you, right? This works even over Zoom. Mm-hmm. But when you have an inability to match with someone, they don't feel connected to you, and therefore they don't invest in the relationship because they feel that there's a disconnect.
I didn't want to cut you off. You just nailed it, because right away when I get on Zoom with somebody for the first time, and I know so many people this year are meeting new people on Zoom, just like we are, and it's just meetings. Hey, I need to intro you to so-and-so, and you're just meeting all these new people. And some people, within a second, like, I don't know if this is going to work out in any capacity, and not even just work. I mean, like personal capacity. Yeah. Because they're just on a different frequency, and they're just on a different path, and that's totally cool. And then there's other people you meet, and within seconds, you're like, holy shit, yes. Just the answer is yes to whatever. Like, this is going to work out because you're cool, we're vibing, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And those are the relationships that you genuinely want to nurture, you want to deepen, you want to invest in, and you want to follow up on, and you want to stay on top of, and you want to bend over backwards for them. And it's like, I have situations like that happen every single week. Mm-hmm. Where I know that the relationship or the conversation, I know let's stay in touch means nothing. Right. And I also know when I leave a conversation and the conversation is more like, oh my God, what are we doing next? Yes. And it's like, it's such a night and day difference.
Yes, exactly. And when somebody is not in the space where they can actually meet you there, it's not their fault. And one of the symptoms of burnout is feeling disconnected. But it's burnout. What I find with burnout that's really important is that almost all the symptoms are cyclical. So they are both a symptom and a cause of, right? We burn out because we don't have strong community connections, and we don't have strong community connections because we're burnt out, and we get stuck in these cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what we have to do, and this is why I still love doing acupuncture, because I can really use acupuncture well in scenarios like this to help people with burnout. What we need to do with people who are burnt out is bring their nervous system back into a state of neutral as much as possible so that their brain can heal and they can re-engage with the world. Burnt out people are disengaged. The opposite of burnout is engaged.
I like that.
So we have this, my job as a coach and as an acupuncturist is to help you reset your nervous system so that you feel safe enough to engage with the world.
It's a pretty powerful job.
I love it.
I love what you said about this idea of community and connection and how important it really is. And consistently, especially in entrepreneurship, people are, at least what I hear is they're fighting this like lonely battle, or it's always, it's them versus, it's us versus them, or it's nobody will ever get me, or it's, I've got my circle, but that's it. No one's in or out. And I love that you say connection is a burnout prevention measure. The opposite of connection is engaged. So assuming someone's listening to this right now, they've tried everything. I hate saying that, but they tried everything, worst case scenario, they tried everything and they're still not getting that connection virtually. They're still not feeling like they're part of community. Do you have any advice or tips, or how does somebody get a quick win under their belt? How do they start getting more of that connection to prevent the burnout?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to take a minute to soak it up.
Yeah, soak it up. For me, it's connection is so important, but the right connection is so important, because there's battery drainers, there's battery energizers, and then there's like the neutrals. Yeah. And I think the neutrals and the drainers are equally as bad.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like you need to put yourself first. If you meet somebody and they start out as a battery energizer, it doesn't mean they're going to be an energizer for as long as you know them.
Yeah.
People change, relationships change, emotions change, responsibilities change, priorities change, and that's totally cool. And I said this to somebody yesterday. It's like, why can't adult friendships just break? Like, why can't you just walk away and just be okay with it because you're both working on yourself?
Or even grieve through it if you have to, but be okay with the fact that you're going to grieve through it because it's over and there's no need to force it to continue. So one of the things that we do in the beginning of burnout coaching overall is called life pruning. Right. So we cut away all the branches that are sucking.
We like jump into the forest and
we cut away all the branches that are sucking up energy unnecessarily, that are not actually bringing you any benefit.
And what are some of those typical branches? Because we all have them.
This is exactly, so this goes back to the connection question. If you're having a hard time connecting, then the people in your life are not the right ones, usually. Which means that you have to really, really take a very hard look at the people around you and decide if there's anyone that you feel anything with. If there's no one that you feel something with, then you're burnt out, and don't dismiss everybody right away, because you might be able to connect once your brain is okay. But you also might need to disengage from people on purpose so that you can heal before you start to connect again. So I don't think there is a quick win scenario when this is actually what's happening, because if we need time for your brain to heal before you can connect with someone, then we need to take that seriously. So I did have a client last year that I told her that I didn't really want her to go out with her friends for 2 months. Just 2 months, just don't go out with anybody. And she said, when you first said that on their next call, she said, when you first said that, I was like, oh my God, I can't do that to myself. She said, and the next day, you know how relieved I was?
Sometimes it's that difficult and also that simple.
Right. I was so relieved. And a lot of people that have had a good time during this coronavirus time have said, I just am glad to not have any social engagements. I'm only connecting with people that I'm actually creating time for on purpose, because I just I don't have to say yes to the happy hour, and I have an automatic excuse for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this teaches us a lot about how we are over connecting, and it's draining us, and it's supposed to be a good thing. So it's not about having a lot of connections or a massive community. It's about having the right connections and the right community. The connections in the community that can teach you the things that you need to learn about yourself. You know, in the life coaching world, there's a lot of information that says, you know, if you just love yourself, then like everything else will just like unicorns and rainbows out of your armpits, like whatever. And I didn't, part of my burnout recovery was learning to appreciate and love myself more. But I learned that through my community, not through myself. We've forgotten that we need people. You know, my best friend is the one who taught me that I was still lovable, even if I was ugly sometimes in action and in thought, because we're all ugly sometimes in action and in thought. And she saw me in those moments and said, I love you anyway. And I was like, what? Wait, what? Huh? That's not possible. I don't even love me in those moments. Right. But I learned in that way that I can still be lovable even when I have bad moments. And I think that we forget that we're supposed to use our people for that. And one of the burnout prevention factors is getting enough recognition and praise for our work. So as an entrepreneur, when are we getting recognition and praise for our work? Right? We're stuck on looking at likes, even though that's not really direct recognition and praise, because a lot of them, you know, oftentimes they're coming from people that we know just want to support us, not necessarily that are loving our content. They're just like, oh, my friend did something cool. Yay. You know?
Like liking a post is probably like the lowest of the totem pole when it comes to like supporting people.
It's like the least they can possibly do.
Yeah.
Right. And so we get caught up in these sort of, what am I going to do to get the recognition that I need as an entrepreneur? And then when we do get recognition, it's oftentimes, and we all do this because we have to, because social proof matters. Oftentimes we are asking people for testimonials that we know had a good experience. Mm-hmm. So we're saying, hey, you with the good experience, can you write about how great I am, please?
Totally.
Right? So then they do it, but we don't take the time to really absorb what they've written or what they thought, because we feel like it was forced. You know, it's like, oh, that she wrote this nice thing, but she didn't write it just like spontaneously. She wrote it because I was like, can you please write some nice things about me?
You know what? It's so funny you say that, because I'm thinking about a testimonial I got yesterday. I got 2 this week, both via video from past clients. Mm-hmm. And I watched them both. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, thank you. That was great. I didn't say that, but I absorbed it. Yeah. And I said, okay, Karan, like, cool that you got some testimonials. And then I've kind of just forgot about it. Now, sometimes, and it doesn't happen like a crazy amount, but sometimes somebody will randomly tag me on like LinkedIn or Facebook. Yes. And the message will read something like, hey, just wanted to give a special shout out to Karan because he helped me with XYZ. And sometimes these are not even clients. They're just people I chat with on Facebook, or they're in a Facebook group. Mm-hmm. And those ones that catch me off guard super unexpectedly, mm-hmm. I never forget. And Ever. They hold a different place in mm-hmm. my heart, and they mean more. And again, it's like, talk about battery energizing, right? When I get a message like that, it's so unexpected.
Exactly. And it is a burnout prevention measure. So the idea then is to be sure that the ones that hit you in the gut, mm-hmm. that you put them in a file somewhere, because you should be reaching back into that file on a regular basis to remind yourself that your work matters to people, even when they're not the ones paying for it. Mm-hmm. Because I got an email last week from a podcast listener, and it was like one of these, like, you know, it went on for a long, long time. And I was reading it, and it was, you know, I definitely am a scroller first thing in the morning. So it was like 6:30 and I was scrolling through my email, and I was looking at it. And so I'm reading, and I'm sitting there in bed, and I started crying because she was like, I'm pretty sure you just saved my life. And it's a free podcast. It's a free podcast. And I'm sitting there and I'm crying at 6:30 in the morning, and my husband looks over at me and he's like,
oh shit, was it our anniversary?
Actually, that was Monday. And he was like, what is wrong with you? I was like, nothing. Look at what she said about my work.
That's amazing.
And those are the ones, and this doesn't mean, hey, listen, everybody out there, we want your testimonials anyway when you work with us, because we do need them for social proof, and we love that you're happy, and they matter. Absolutely, they matter, and they make me feel good. However, the ones that really hit you in the gut, those unexpected moments where somebody notices you, that allows you to feel seen, you have to put those in a file somewhere. You have to keep those for yourself, because as an entrepreneur, you have to dose that out to yourself. You have to take a weekly supplement of good vibes from other people.
I love that. Good vibe supplement. We should partner up on that.
Yeah, let's do it. Good vibe supplement.
A product or something.
I feel like sometimes when I'm doing podcasts, I say the smartest things that I don't think of when I'm on my own.
That's the beauty of two-way dialogue, right?
Right.
Sometimes you see something in my background and you're like, oh, pink statue. Oh, good vibes. Right?
Right?
Who knows?
Good vibe supplement is such a great idea. We should play with that.
Cool. Kate, before I get into kind of my three final questions, I do have another question. And this is more so around like practices, routines, habits that people should incorporate into their life. I think like any good habit, it needs to be sustainable. You can't take somebody from 0 to 6 without going from 0 to 1 to 2. And it's easy for someone to read an article and say, okay, I just need to meditate. I just need to sleep for 8 hours. I just need to drink eight ounces of water after getting up.
Eat one apple.
10,000 steps, one apple, get my physical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a million things. Do you have what are your best practices, best tips on people that people can implement easily into their life, incorporate it into their life to help them have a little bit less burnout and hopefully never get there?
So my easiest and best tip is pay attention to resentment. Every time you see and find resentment in your life, you will find a boundary that has been crossed, usually by you yourself first before the other person crossed it. And if you can take those pieces of resentment and turn them into new boundaries, not only will you stop wasting the energy on the emotion of resentment that is simply there for information for you, it's not there for anything else, but you're usually ignoring it. If you can take that energy and turn it into a boundary, not only do you save yourself energy now, you create more energy for yourself now, but you also save yourself from losing energy in the future. So for me, the habit becomes stop trying to be positive Polly all the time because the law of attraction told you that you're only supposed to think good thoughts. Be honest with your emotional state and pay attention to the signals that you're getting because they mean something.
Yeah, life is definitely not as easy as the unicorns and rainbows that you said earlier.
No, it is not. And I just that part of the world of life coaching and personal and spiritual growth, I think, is the most damaging part of the entire journey. Like, can we stop pretending like we're not allowed to be angry?
Mm-hmm.
Anger is just information. Joy is just information. All of it is just information. None of it is good or bad. It's just information. But we're not reading it. We're not using it. And I think if we can create a habit of emotional agility where we see an emotion, we experience the emotion, and then we use it for something, we live much better, less prone to burnout lives.
Big fan of this, Kate. Big fan of this conversation. Okay, my three final questions.
Okay.
The first, what are you most excited about in the next 60 days?
In the next 60 days, that gets us, that's till the end of the year, correct? Ish. Around right now. Actually, next week we're signing on a brand new townhome.
What is that? What do you mean?
A townhouse. We bought a house.
Oh, that's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So that's super exciting.
You're moving from your current spot?
We're moving from our current spot. It's about 20 minutes away, and we found a place that was being built. So it's brand new. It's the floors we wanted and the tiles we wanted and the cabinets we wanted. And
look at this.
I have moved in the past 14, 15 years, probably 20 times. And this will be the first time that I'm going to be like really settled in a place. And I am so thrilled to throw some roots down.
Cool. That sounds like you're really happy about that.
I am.
Outside of, we didn't even talk about your book that much. And
that's all right.
It was such a fascinating conversation. But we'll have to have you back for round 2 to talk about just the book. Outside of your own book, have there been other books that have impacted your life, books that you recommend other people, entrepreneurs, business owners read?
Oh, there's so many of them. I'm an avid reader. I read probably a book a week.
Love it. You're my kind of person.
I do a lot of reading. The one that actually came up today, which I haven't read in probably 4 or 5 years, is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Yeah, I read that a couple of years ago. Actually, I haven't revisited it.
Yeah, I haven't read it in a long time either, but it came up today, and I thought that it might be time for me to revisit it.
I'm writing that down. Any other come to mind?
The other book that always comes back to me and is much more spiritual than business is Outrageous Openness by Tosha Silver. And it is about learning to let the divine lead. And the divine is your intuition, is whatever it is that you want it to be. But part of my burnout story was that I created a definition of success that included my ego in a really big way. And this is the book that reminds me to get back into my heart.
Sounds like this is the perfect time of year for everyone to get that book.
Right.
And my final question, and by the way, I know you're going to think about other books later, so send me a message.
Okay, I have so many. I could go on for hours.
My final question for you, Kate. Tomorrow morning, everyone wakes up in the world, every city, every country, your friends back in Poland and in Prague, Canada, US, everyone wakes up tomorrow morning. They all open up their bedroom curtains and they're looking at a billboard. And every person in the world is looking at the exact same billboard tomorrow morning when they wake up, except tomorrow, Kate gets to control the message and Kate gets to write her message for everyone to read. What message would you share?
You are lovable.
You are lovable. Powerful stuff, Kate Donovan. Powerful stuff.
Thanks, Karan.
Kate, where is the best place for people to find you, locate you, and all that good stuff?
All that good stuff, all the stuff that you could ever need, you'll find on my website, which is katedonovan.com. My favorite places to hang out on social media are LinkedIn and Instagram, and both of those are also Kate Donovan. I think my Instagram might have a dash in it, but if you type in Kate Donovan, you'll find the Burnout Coach info, so it won't be that hard. But those are the places I hang out the most and have the most fun in.
Awesome. And people, we will link that, of course, in the show notes. Kate, this was such an incredible conversation. You were very easy to talk to, and I feel like time just kind of flew by today. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm so glad. Thanks for having me.